everybody, welcome back to Sticky Floor Friday, the internet movie show that takes an in-depth look at the movies coming to theaters each week. And unlike Batman, I am not afraid of a deep dive. Even when that movie is Hitman's wife's Bodyguard, which I didn't think I'd have much to say about, but oh do I. And the obvious place to start is with the title. We know the original one had the ridiculous title of The Hitman's Bodyguard. That already requires some mental gymnastics to understand the premise. This time, they're just openly mocking the idea. My only hope is that the filmmakers are banking on the series continuing for years so they can eventually have a movie titled Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard's Wife's Hitman's Bodyguard's Bodyguard's Wife's Hitman's
Father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate.
I know that's the easy joke, but it points out the absurdity of everything surrounding this franchise, including the fact that this is a franchise. For starters, here's a little trivia question for everybody out there. What is the movie sequel officially called? The original, as we know, is The Hitman's Bodyguard. According to the poster, this is called Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Where did the go? It's like, guys, you got a great title here. You got everything people love. You got the Hitman, you got the Bodyguard. They'll remember that from the first movie. You throw in a wife. People like wives. But I gotta tell you, we gotta trim it down. Do we need this? And they said no. Except maybe not, because Rotten Tomatoes calls it The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, and over on IMDb, it's The with a note that says it was formerly Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, but on Wikipedia, the page for The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard redirects you to Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Boston Globe has a the in its review, Ebert's site has no the. So we go to the source, the Lionsgate publicity website, and there's the poster, no the, we've solved our wait a second, right next to it in all caps, The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Not a great sign that the people making the movie don't even know what it's called. Or maybe they don't care, they're just raking in the money. I'd imagine 95% of conversations about Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard are, that's a real movie? But the other 5% are, one ticket for the Hitman's Wife movie thing, please. Like, no one is calling it Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. I wish I didn't have to keep saying Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. In fact, from here on out, I'm just going to shorten it a little bit. We're going to call it Hube. So if you hear me say Hube, I'm just talking about Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. But at least the confusion in marketing is consistent. The Hitman's Bodyguard appears to exist solely to capitalize on the heat Ryan Reynolds had coming off Deadpool. And the ads reflect that. The Ryan Reynolds brand supersedes whatever he's promoting. It's all the same tone selling you on Ryan Reynolds, whether it's Deadpool or Hitman's Bodyguard or alcohol or cell phones. Which is why this straightforward action comedy gets a super relevant parody poster of The Bodyguard, a movie that came out in 1992. It feels desperate, straining very hard to be cool and match Ryan's voice, but it's obviously a bunch of 50-year-old men in a boardroom saying, "How do we viral?" The tagline was, "Get triggered," which is just a phrase in the zeitgeist. There is nothing triggering about this benign action comedy. Another one was, "It's not the size that matters, it's how you use it." Again, not relevant to the movie, just a jumble of words based off the phrase, size matters. But somehow, it did its job. This Hitman's Bodyguard was the 2017 cream filling in the Oreo cookie of Deadpool in 2016 and Deadpool 2 in 2018. It was the perfect pocket, and maybe the only pocket for it to hit, and it was a hit, raking in almost $177 million. The script was written in 2011 by Tom O'Connor, and it made the Blacklist, a highly coveted list of most liked unproduced screenplays that gets published every year, and then a lot of those movies end up getting produced. Hitman's Bodyguard sold, but it would take several years before it would get made. In the meantime, Tim wrote Fire with Fire, that, of course, famous Bruce Willis movie everyone's heard of, was not well received, to say the least. But I do like that if you visit their page on Rotten Tomatoes, you are openly mocked with these, "You might also like these suggestions." Like, hey, you like this shitty movie? Here's some other ones to go along with your bad taste. Though I gotta say, I am insulted Sudden Death is on this list. Die Hard at a hockey rink is very much my shit, and I will not apologize for a tangent that leads us there. This was actually intended as a drama until 8 weeks before shooting. But once Reynolds and Jackson were on board, it underwent a frantic 2-week rewrite to infuse it with comedy, which is just like the old saying, comedy equals tragedy minus time, minus tragedy, plus Ryan Reynolds. The plot revolves around Ryan Reynolds as a AAA bodyguard who has fallen from grace and is tasked with protecting a hitman played by Samuel L. Jackson. Jackson is testifying against an evil dictator of Belarus, played by a scenery-chewing, but mostly in the background, Gary Oldman. Sam Jackson and Ryan Reynolds don't get along because Jackson has tried to kill Reynolds a bunch of times, so their back-and-forth insults make up most of the dialogue. It wants desperately to be Lethal Weapon or 48 Hours. It's not even Lethal Weapon 4 or another 48 Hours. But it's also not cop-out levels of bad. It's mildly entertaining with one inspired sequence using Lionel Richie's Hello in an unexpected way. They know their way to my heart. I love Lionel Richie. But then they repeat the gag a second time with a different song to lesser effect. And then they do it a third time, and now I'm retroactively regretting calling it inspired. Although I guess they were so inspired by it, they did it 3 times in the movie. There's very little emotional investment in the characters, and whether they succeed or fail doesn't really matter. Ryan Reynolds' story arc is that he messed up at his job, he lost his AAA bodyguard rating, and he wants to get it back. He was living his best life back then, we're told, but we're never given a tangible glimpse of what that life is or why he would want it back. By all accounts, everyone tells him he was a bad person living an empty life, so I don't really understand that. But Samuel L. Jackson is given a little more of a backstory that works better. It works better. And it lets us know that he is a killer with a moral compass. And when it comes to the frantically rewritten comedy, the jokes sound like jokes. I guess that's the best way I can put it. They're delivered with the cadence of a setup and punchline, but they rarely land. Here's an example. There's a moment where they're deciding whether to pick a flashy car or a sensible car, and Ryan Reynolds chooses the one that's boring because it will blend in. It's something established earlier in the movie. That's fine. But then, immediately, he blasts through a gate and he crashes the car. And the punchline is that he's surprised at how responsive the car is.
Whoa! That's responsive.
Which goes against his character, who always chooses the sensible car and therefore shouldn't be surprised by how it handles. Not only that, they stick with this car and less than a minute later, they get spotted anyway. So it's a joke that doesn't make sense for the characters and it drags down the momentum of the story. It also feels backwards. If this was the one time his character chose the flashy car and immediately crashed it, that makes infinitely more sense. The rest of the comedy really hinges on your feelings on Ryan Reynolds. He hasn't cornered the market on cloying, overly self-aware, smarmy white guys, but he is the best at it, weaponizing that personality to immense success in Deadpool. In The Hitman's Bodyguard, on paper, he's supposed to play against type as a straight-laced bodyguard who thinks boring is best. But in execution, he's just as quippy as ever, and it feels like he gets worse as the movie goes on, falling back into the same role he always plays. Same with Samuel L. Jackson, but at this point, he's a Teflon movie icon with nothing to prove, and he knows it. This is the guy who once took a movie because he could golf and wear a kilt. He doesn't give a fuck. I always appreciate the enthusiasm he brings to even the most rote role, and I also love the fact that he's 72, can you believe that? And he's still playing characters who should be in their mid to late 40s. They never say how old he is in Hitman's Bodyguard, but we're to assume he's spry enough to leap off a stairwell to deliver a perfect headshot, run up 20 flights of stairs with a gunshot wound in his knee, leap off a rooftop, hitting everything on the way down, and then just get up and keep moving like nothing happened, all in one sequence. It's absurd. But it fits perfectly into my Benjamin Button de-aging rules, where an older actor can play any age younger than themselves, but when they're supposed to play their age or older, they get replaced by a baby. I read a Vice interview from 2017 with Reynolds and Jackson, and when asked about being pigeonholed in roles, they gave a pretty good explanation for why they basically play the same characters in all their movies. Ryan Reynolds said, "Some of the best movie stars in the world are guys who stay in their lane. Sam knows what his audience expects from him, and he's delivering that." And Jackson says, "It's too narcissistic that they need to see this side of me. But people go to the movies for a specific reason. When I leave a movie, I want to leave it like, that was awesome." These are two guys who know their brand and don't feel the need to tweak the formula anymore. That's why Ryan Reynolds will always be a variation of Van Wilder / Deadpool, and Sam Jackson will always be a variation of Jules Winfield. Oh, almost forgot. Salma Hayek is also in this movie, and her two character traits are angry and in prison. And that's it. Both movies are directed by Patrick Hughes, whose mini bio on IMDb is extremely modest. Australian-born writer, producer, and director Patrick Hughes continues to establish himself as one of Hollywood's most in-demand filmmakers by bringing compelling material to global audiences, anchored by striking visuals and comedic storytelling. Okay, all right, settle down, PR person who wrote this. His only other mainstream movie was Expendables 3. And now we can talk about the sequel. This time, Salma Hayek is angry and out of prison. Character development. I love it. And now it's Ryan Reynolds' turn to protect her. And since this is a sequel, they've added a whole new stunt cast of characters. And at least this time around, they knew it was a comedy going in, so it's got to be funnier, right? Unfortunately, the horrific marketing continues. Here are the taglines for Hube. Hit me, baby, one more time. Again, super relevant reference of a 23-year-old song. Killer threesome. I don't believe this is a love triangle, but they are killers, so we'll call that a foul ball. How about this one? Enter to win a trip to the all-inclusive Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, Punta Cana, and more at iHeartRadio.com/HitMan'sWife. But here's where things really go awry. It's the character posters. Samuel L. Jackson doesn't have an inside voice. Morgan Freeman is blowing up on... I can't even finish. This is really reminding me of the Shaft marketing we had to go through. You know, the third movie titled Shaft back in 2019. You should live stream me putting my foot up your ass. I'll avocado toast your punk ass. But the most nonsensical character poster is for Antonio Banderas. Antonio Banderas is all fiesta in the front and siesta in the back. Not only doesn't that make sense because you can't see the back of his hair, but it's not even a one-to-one comparison to the mullet saying. Business up front, party in the back. This one is a party up front, a short nap in the back. This isn't marketing. This is an all-out assault on our intelligence. It's getting lambasted by critics, even worse than the original, but of course it is. This is the movie equivalent of a sparkler. It distracts you with its bright, shiny lights for a brief amount of time, then fizzles out and leaves you unsatisfied, and you say, is that all there is to it? Hey, that's what Catwoman said. I said, that's what Catwoman said. Its success will live or die off the charm of the leads and whether people are interested in joining them for another adventure. But this will turn out to be a big test for the Ryan Reynolds brand, because in a little over a month, he stars in another action comedy, Free Guy, which has a high-concept hook of Reynolds as a non-playable character NPC stuck in a video game who becomes aware he's stuck in a video game. So it's a question of how long the audience wants to stay in the Ryan Reynolds lane when he's out of the Deadpool costume. What do you think? Are you going to go see Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard? And if so, might I suggest don't? Use that time to watch something worthwhile, a little more interesting, like Sudden Death or Bo Burnham Inside on Netflix. That's an actual genuine recommendation. Or a wall. Any wall. Just stare at a wall. You will get more out of it than this movie. This straightforward action comedy gets a super relevant parody poster.
The wickedly talented,
Super relevant
one and only Adele Dazeem.